Polyvagal Theory, a Primer, Part 3. This is written by Dr. Stephen Porges. Polyvagal theory uses an inclusive definition of the autonomic nervous system that includes sensory pathways and emphasizes the brainstem regulation of the ventral vagus to the regulation of the striated muscles of the face and head to provide an integrated social engagement system on the ventral vagal complex and the social engagement system. In contrast to the traditional model that focuses on tonic motor influences on visceral organs, polyvagal theory emphasizes autonomic reactivity. Polyvagal theory accepts the traditional model of interpreting tonic autonomic influences on several visceral organs as the sum of a paired antagonism between vagal and sympathetic pathways. However, polyvagal theory proposes a phylogenetically ordered hierarchy in which autonomic subsystems react to challenges in the reverse of their evolutionary history, consistent with the principle of dissolution. The theory postulates that when the ventral vagus and the associated social engagement system are optimally functioning, the autonomic nervous system supports health, growth, and restoration. During this ventral vagal state, there is an optimal autonomic balance between the sympathetic nervous system and the dorsal vagal pathways to the subdiaphragmatic organs. When the function of the ventral vagus is dampened or withdrawn, the autonomic nervous system is optimized to support defense and not health. According to polyvagal theory, these defense reactions may be manifested as fight or flight or shutdown. As fight or flight defense, there's an increase in sympathetic activity to promote mobilization strategies while inhibiting digestion and other dorsal vagal functions. In contrast, when manifested as shutdown, sympathetic activation is depressed, while there is a surge of the dorsal vagal influence that would promote fainting, defecation, and an inhibition of motor behavior often seen in mammals feigning death. Cues of safety are the treatment. Polyvagal theory proposes that cues of safety are an efficient and profound antidote for trauma. The theory emphasizes that safety is defined by feeling safe and not simply by the removal of threat. Feeling safe is dependent on three conditions. 1. The autonomic nervous system cannot be in a state that supports defense. 2. The social engagement system needs to be activated to down-regulate sympathetic activation and functionally contain the sympathetic nervous system and the dorsal vagal circuit within an optimal range that supports health, growth, and restoration. Cues of safety, such as prosodic vocalizations, positive facial expressions, and gestures, need to be available and detected via neuroception. In everyday situations, the cues of safety may initiate the sequence by triggering the social engagement system via the process of neuroception, which will contain autonomic state within the homeostatic range and restrict the autonomic nervous system from reacting in defense. This constrained range of autonomic state has been referred to as the window of tolerance and can be expanded through neuro exercises embedded in therapy. Neural exercise as intervention. Polyvagal theory focuses on specific neural exercises that provide opportunities to optimize the regulation of the physiological state. According to the theory, neural exercises consisting of transitory disruptions and repairs of physiological state through social interactions, employing cues of safety, would promote greater resilience. Play, such as peekaboo, is an example of a neural exercise that parents frequently employ with their children. Play provides an example of a therapeutic model in which autonomic state is disrupted and then stabilized through the recruitment of the social engagement system. This model can be generalized to the clinical setting, in which the client experiences disrupted changes in autonomic state, which are stabilized through the support of the therapist. Functionally, therapy becomes a platform to exercise the capacity to shift state by recruiting features of the social engagement system to keep the autonomic nervous system out of prolonged states of defense. This process is initialized through co-regulation between the client and the therapist. Subsequently, when the client experiences reliable co-regulation, the potency of transitory shifts in state as triggers of defense is reduced, and self-regulation spontaneously emerges. Through the metaphor of play, the social engagement system is coupled with the sympathetic nervous system. This coupling enables bodily cues of mobilization to be contained within a social setting and not to erupt into aggression. However, these eruptions or tantrums frequently occur in children and adults with behavioral problems and psychiatric disorders. Research documents a consistency of a downregulated social engagement system, example, lack of prosody, blunted facial expression, auditory hypersensitivities, poor eye gaze, in individuals with state regulation disorders. Polyvagal theory emphasizes that the vulnerability to these disruptions is due to a physiological state shift characterized by sympathetic activation without the resource of efficient self-soothing or calming through the social engagement system. The metaphor of play is also useful in deconstructing intimacy. Intimacy is a state-dependent behavior. It involves coupling the social engagement system with the dorsal vagal circuit to enable immobilization without shutdown. Intimacy requires a state in which touch and proximity do not trigger defense. In mammals, immobilization is a vulnerable state. For intimacy to occur, neuroception has to interpret proximity and contact as safe and shift the body into a state that is welcoming. This coupling of two bodies initially occurs through cues of safety, such as prosodic vocalizations and gentle contact. Intimacy is often associated with the form of play or foreplay. However, similar to the positive attributes of play, which functions as a neural exercise, optimizing the ability of the social engagement system to regulate the sympathetic nervous system, foreplay and truly safe experiences of intimacy provide a neural exercise optimizing the ability of the social engagement system to regulate the dorsal vagal pathway. This form of neural exercise may have long-term beneficial effects on the regulation of bodily organs by supporting homeostasis. Moreover, safe foreplay and intimacy may also be a preparatory neural exercise for women that, by enabling immobilization with fear, would optimize the reproductive behaviors and processes, including the facilitating childbirth. Listening as a neural exercise. Polyvagal theory emphasizes how listening is a portal to the social engagement system. Based on polyvagal theory, the Listening Project protocol is a listening intervention designed to reduce auditory hypersensitivities, improve auditory processing, calm physiological state, and support spontaneous social engagement. The intervention is currently known as the Safe and Sound Protocol and is available to professionals only through the integrated learning systems. The Safe and Sound Protocol is based on an exercise model that uses computer-altered acoustic stimulation to modulate the frequency band passed to the participant. The protocol was theoretically designed to reduce auditory hypersensitivities by recruiting the anti-masking functions of the middle ear muscles to optimize the transfer function of the middle ear for the processing of human speech. Modulation of the acoustic energy within the frequencies of human voice, similar to exaggerated vocal prosody, is hypothesized to provide cues of safety to the individual. Hypothetically, these cues are processed via neuroception and reflexively recruit and modulate the neuroregulation of the middle ear muscles. Based on the theory, the process would functionally reduce auditory hypersensitivities, stimulate spontaneous vocal engagement, and calm physiological state by increasing the influence of ventral vagal pathways on the heart. The intervention stimuli is listened to on headphones, and the protocol consists of 60 minutes of listening on 5 consecutive days in a quiet room without major distractors, while the clinician, parent, or researcher provides social support to ensure that the participant remains calm. The neurophysiological basis of the intervention is elaborated in other publications. Since the late 1990s, my research group has been evaluating and refining the protocol. We've tested the protocol on several hundred children with a variety of disorders, including children with autism, spectrum disorders, speech-language delays, auditory hypersensitivities, and behavioral regulation disorders. The outcomes have been positive, with noticeable increases in spontaneous social engagement behaviors, reduced sound sensitivities, improved organization of social behaviors and emotional state, and improved and more spontaneous verbal communication highlighted by more expressive voices. We have also conducted and published 2 peer-reviewed publications describing our findings, and during the past few years have organized several clinical trials which are currently registered on clinicaltrials.gov. These new clinical trials are evaluating the intervention with different populations, including children with abuse histories, individuals with attention and concentration difficulties, and children with Prader-Willi syndrome. Since the release of the Safe and Sound Protocol, we've received feedback from therapists that matches the positive behavioral changes in children that we observed in our research. During the 20 years that we've tested the Safe and Sound Protocol with children, we have not observed any major adverse effects. Occasionally, we've observed an initial tactile sensitivity to the headphones, which would rapidly resolve. Also, perhaps due to previous unpleasant experiences with sounds and headphones, the combination of sounds and context might provoke minor anxiety in the child, which is rapidly resolved. And the success is in part due to the safe context in which the intervention is delivered. For children, the safe context is efficiently structured by creating a safe clinical environment with a therapist who projects welcoming cues of warmth to the child. This sense of a safe container is supported by a safe and protective parent or caregiver, accompanying the child while the child experiences the Safe and Sound Protocol. The Safe and Sound Protocol is an intervention that has two components. First, structuring a safe context in which the intervention is delivered, and second, delivering acoustic features of a sound presented during the intervention that serve as a neuro exercise. The safe component is managed by the practitioner delivering the intervention. The sound component is embedded in the acoustic stimuli. It's important to acknowledge successful implementation of the intervention requires both components. For the Safe and Sound Protocol to be effective, it's necessary to maintain the client's nervous system in a state of safety. For the Safe and Sound Protocol to be effective with adults, similar to applications with children, it's necessary to maintain the nervous system in a state of safety. Maintaining the adult's nervous system in a state of safety may be challenging, especially adults with trauma histories. Unlike the safe containment that children experience in the presence of a caring and supportive adult, adults frequently arrive at the clinic without a supportive partner. Suggesting that a trusted friend would be available for support and regulation accompanying the client would be helpful in maintaining the client in a state of safety. Vulnerability to state changes might be exacerbated if the adult comes alone to the clinic. Emotional and physiological reactions to the intervention are a potent signal that the stimuli are effectively triggering neural circuits. However, for the stimuli to trigger and exercise neural circuits that promote spontaneous social communication, improve state regulation, and reduced auditory hypersensitivities, the nervous system has to be in a safe state. More accurately, the nervous system has to feel protected and sufficiently trusting not to move into states of self-protection, hypervigilance, and defense. This may require a titration of the acoustic stimuli with the client, temporarily pausing the intervention stimuli when the client elicits a strong emotional or visceral reaction. If the client feels discomfort, the client should be empowered to pause the intervention to allow the nervous system to stabilize. Although the fixed protocol works extremely well with children, adults may have a complicated history and may have difficulties feeling safe. As we move into the treatment of adults, we will continue to learn through the detailed comments from the therapist about variations in responses. This important feedback will allow us to modify the protocol to optimize the client's outcome. Passive and active pathways. The human nervous system provides two pathways to trigger neural mechanisms capable of down-regulating defense and enabling states of calmness that support health, spontaneous social behavior, and connectiveness. One pathway is passive and does not require conscious awareness, see neuroception, and the other is active and requires conscious voluntary behavior to trigger specific neural mechanisms that change physiological state. See neural exercise. Both the passive and active pathways regulate the social engagement system. The passive pathway recruits the social engagement system through cues of safety, such as a quiet environment, positive and compassionate therapist-based interactions, prosodic quality or melodic intonation of the therapist vocalizations, and music modulated across frequency bands that overlap with vocal signals of safety, used by a mother to calm her infant. Successful therapists, regardless of their orientation, often intuitively manipulate the passive pathway in treatment. In contrast, the active pathway recruits the social engagement system when the patient engages in reciprocal dialogue and other practices such as vocalization, voluntary controlled breathing, movements, or postures. Access to the client's active pathway is dependent on the passive pathway, effectively triggering a state of safety in the client. The passive pathway is an effective and efficient method to recruit the social engagement system to spontaneously transition the client into a ventral vagal state. The passive pathway provides the client with feelings of safety, and the active pathway provides the neural exercises to empower the client to efficiently move into and out of ventral vagal state. Through effective interventions, the client may have a transitory experiences in states previously associated with defense and dominated by either the sympathetic nervous system or the dorsal vagus. The exercises enable the client to functionally contain previously disruptive autonomic states by accessing the social engagement system and the ventral vagus. The passive pathway provides the client with feelings of safety, while the active pathway challenges these feelings of safety by exercising the neural resources of the social engagement system. These sequential processes expand resilience and provide resources to calm and co-regulate and self-regulate when challenged. Polyvagal theory. Trauma only makes sense in the light of evolution. At the core of the evolved features that define mammals in the role that social interaction plays in their survival, functionality, the ability to establish feelings of safety within the social interaction, underlies their survival and acts as a prepotent biological imperative. This important attribute and the refinement of the meaning of survival of the fittest was emphasized by the evolutionary biologist Dobzhansky, as he stated that the fittest may also be the gentlest, because survival often requires mutual help and cooperation. For the survivors of trauma, their lives reflect a loss of these mammalian qualities. As polyvagal theory has deconstructed several of the mechanisms through which trauma retunes the nervous system, an understanding of evolution and dissolution provides insights into the physiological and psychological experiences and helps the client generate a plausible, personal, explanatory narrative. This emphasis on evolution and understanding trauma reactions is reminiscent of Dobzhansky's famous quote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." Consistent with Dobzhansky's, a polyvagal perspective explicitly assumes that the response to trauma only makes sense in the light of evolution. Synthesis. Polyvagal theory emphasizes that humans, similar to other mammals, consist of a collection of dynamic, adaptive, interactive, and interdependent physiological systems. From this perspective, it becomes apparent that the autonomic nervous system cannot be treated as functionally distinct from the central nervous system. Consistent with polyvagal theory, the heart and other organs are not floating on a visceral sea, but are metaphorically anchored to central structures by motor pathways and continuously signaling central regulatory structures via an abundance of sensory pathways. This dynamic bidirectional communication between brain structures and bodily organs influences mental state, biases perception of the environment, prepares the individual to be either welcoming or defensive of others, and these processes simultaneously support or disrupt health, growth, and restoration. The theory provides a plausible explanation of how a response to life threat could retune the autonomic nervous system to lose resilience and to remain in defense states. This retuning might lead to disruptions in homeostatic function with manifestations in visceral organs, example heart disease or irritable bowel syndrome, or diffuse symptoms of dysregulation such as fibromyalgia and dysautonomia, while simultaneously limiting access to the satial engagement system that would compromise the ability to co-regulate through social interactions. These common consequences of trauma are highlighted by difficulties in feeling connected and safe with others. Polyvagal theory explains how both aspects of disruption, the lack of safety with others, and the disorder of bodily organs, are manifestations of a retuned autonomic nervous system and offers insights into rehabilitation. Thus, polyvagal theory provides an optimistic strategy for therapy that would be based on retuning the autonomic nervous system through portals of the social engagement system.